When Hajin recalled when they had just climbed the mountain, he realized that he had been mistaken, because they were in the same place and time. He assumed that he would fall into the same timeline as them. At that time, Hajin walked following them from behind, but his attention was momentarily distracted by something, and when he looked back in front of him, he was then stunned. The people in front of him suddenly disappeared and the environment he was in suddenly changed drastically. Seeing that, Hajin then confused and surprised tried to call them, but he didn't get any response. Only after some time he explored the place. He then realized that the place he was in the timeline now was Gwangmyeong, long before Kim Suho and the others arrived, more precisely, 5 weeks before their arrival. At first he felt frustrated, but it turned out that this was not as bad as he thought. After thinking about it carefully, Hajin then realized that he had missed something. He missed the fact that only they would go to the same timeline in the original story. This did match the setting. Even so, Hajin still felt uncomfortable dealing with it. In addition, as he had expected from the beginning, the jinn that were trying to dominate this place were much stronger than in the original story. To prepare for the arrival of Kim Suho and the others, during these 5 weeks, Hajin had kept himself busy. He set up a base at a point where he could watch without clashing with the enemy. He also secretly kept attacking her subordinates to hinder their growth, eating alone, fighting alone, developing alone, and running alone for 40 days, until finally, he could meet them again. After finally meeting Hajin, they then asked about their doubts. Hajin confirmed it. This was Gwangmyeong in 1972, Hell on Earth, only a year and 3 months after the outcall occurred, although the robbers had told them that fact. But hearing it directly from Hajin still made them shocked and horrified. They then asked him, "So, how long have you been here?" Hearing that, Hajin then tried to remember. He then answered, "Year." They were then shocked to hear that. The environment suddenly fell silent in the midst of their shock. Seeing that, Hajin then said that he was just joking. He was here for about 5 weeks, but, even though Hajin said so, but the 4 of them didn't seem to believe it and put on worried faces when they saw him. Seeing that, Hajin immediately said that this time he wasn't joking. He has been doing everything alone all this time. His hair also lengthened due to the density of mana here. Hearing that, Jonghak then asked the core question, "So, have you found out the cause of this phenomenon?" Hajin confirmed it, more or less, but first, he then invited them to return to the base and talk about it there. After a while, they then saw a building that was more like a ruin in front of them. Seeing the place, Jonghak asked him, "Do you call this a base? Even my horse wouldn't live in a place like this." In contrast to Jonghak, who looked so apathetic, Suho then with a worried expression asked him, "Did you really live in a place like this for a year?" Hajin was annoyed to hear that. He had already said that it had only been 5 weeks here. Why didn't he believe him, even though Hajin called this place a base? But, when Yona saw the place clearly, she didn't see anything there, right at that moment. Nayeon's face then paled when she saw a horrible little creature there. The little creature was a cockroach. Nayeon immediately screamed in fear when she saw it. Hearing her scream, Hajin then immediately approached and quickly finished the cockroaches. Seeing that, with a frightened face and trembling body, Nayeon then praised him. She said that she was amazed at him. Hajin could only sigh seeing that. He then took out something and asked them to wait for a while. After that, he then inserted the stigma's mana into the object. Right after that, a large tent suddenly appeared where he was. Nayeon was then surprised at the sudden appearance of the tent. She was also amazed to see that. While looking at them, Hajin was sure that they must be hungry now, so, he then invited them to eat. Their eyes immediately lit up hearing that, but, in the midst of their ecstasy, Hajin suddenly said that there was a problem. They were then confused to hear that. While pulling out a meat, Hajin said that they still had to cut it. Nayeon and Yona immediately complained at that. They said that they couldn't do it. They didn't want to do it. Hajin had expected that. He then told them that he had eaten all the food he had brought, so they had no choice. Actually, Hajin had tried to cut it before, but he couldn't do it. He was a little nauseous when he did it, but he certainly wouldn't tell them that. Soho then raised his hand and volunteered. He said that he would do it. Hearing that, Hajin then told Yonghan to help Soho. Yonghan understood. Hearing that Soho would cut the meat, Jonghak then put on a mocking smile. He felt that it was suitable and perfect for someone like him, but, his joy did not last long because Hajin suddenly handed him a bucket. While pointing in a direction, Hajin told him that there was a river nearby. He asked him to fetch water there. Jonghak was then annoyed and angry because how dare he tell him like that. Hajin had expected his anger, so. He then turned to Chai Nayun and asked her to go with Shin Jonghak. Hearing that, Nayun immediately came out of the tent and happily agreed to it. Jonghak's mood immediately changed 180 degrees. Hearing that, he was no longer angry at this time and even looked forward to it, but there seemed to be someone who was not happy to see that. It was certainly Yona. She was upset why it had to be with Nayun. Seeing that, Hajin wondered, was she frowning because he did not pair her with Shin Jonghak? Hajin was really helpless with that, but he then immediately thought of a solution. He then asked, when they bring the water, should we make ramen? Yona's ears immediately perked up when she heard that. She then immediately asked Hajin about it. While smiling slightly, Hajin asked her back, why, is that food not luxurious enough for the tongue of a rich person like you? While pretending not to care, Yona then said that it was better than starving to death. Hajin was speechless seeing that this person really liked junk food. It was obvious from her tone of voice. After that, the two of them then cleaned up and set the dining table. Seeing the environment around the tent already clean and the dining table already arranged neatly in front of her, Yona wiped her sweat for a moment. She felt better now. He then turned to Hajin and asked something that had confused her while she was here. Why can't we use mana here? If we can, doing all this will take a lot less time. Hearing that, Hajin explained. The mana brought from the present cannot be used in the past. He asked her to be patient. They just need to wait a little while and the mana will start to collect. The outcall just happened, so the concentration of mana here is more concentrated, but also more wild and difficult to control. He guessed they might need about a week to adapt. After finishing grilling the meat, Hajin then immediately served it to them, but Jonghak and Nayun's faces looked uncertain when they saw the cooking. Seeing that, Hajin told them to stop complaining about the food and told them to just eat. They had to eat so that their mana could recover quickly. Even the animals here were filled with mana. Hearing that, Jonghak was silent for a moment. He then looked at Suho and Yonghan who looked very ravenous in eating their dishes. Seeing that, Jonghak then ventured and tried to eat the dish. Nayun was then surprised to see that. She now also realized that she inevitably had to eat the food. She then ventured and tried to put the food in her mouth. But, just as she finally chewed the food, her eyes immediately shone brightly. She seemed to taste food from heaven at this time. She then surprisedly asked, why does it taste so good? Hearing that, Hajin then explained, it was because the mana concentration in the past was much higher than the Wind Mountain in the present, so this meat was better than most high-grade meat in the present. Livestock with high mana concentration was much more delicious and categorized as luxury food. Hearing that, Nayun did not hesitate anymore, and immediately took a lot of the meat to her plate. Seeing that, Yona did not want to be outdone. She realized, if it continued like this, they would finish all the meat. After a while, they finally finished all the food. Their stomachs were full at the moment. Seeing that, Hajin then clapped his hands to get their attention and said that the break time was over. Now, he would explain what was going on, so he told them to listen carefully. This regression was the work of spirits. Hearing that, Jonghak immediately refuted his words. He felt that his words were really ridiculous. Regression was one of the big myths, so he didn't think a spirit had the power to send people back in time. Hajin didn't dispute that. Normally, spirits couldn't cause that kind of miracle, but, he then asked him, there was a Tower of Time in Wind Mountain, right? Jonghak confirmed that. His grandfather conquered it in 2000. He heard that when a tower was conquered, the tower then solidified into a lump of mana, and settled in this realm, just like the floating stone from Clancy Islet. Hajin confirmed it. While showing a crystal, he then said, he used a special way to bring us here. The method he used was the remnant of the tower. When the tower solidified, some mana that was not completely stored and spread out, over time it would crystallize. The spirit used that power to pull us to the recorded world. Soho was confused by the term. Hajin explained, abbreviation, we are not regressing, but rather in a space created through magic that mimics a certain area in the past, and in this place, there are jinn who are also trapped by the spirit. Just like them, the jinn calls herself Asura and she uses mana crystals to get stronger. Hearing that, Yona then raised her hand and said that she had a question. The use of mana crystals was only developed in the 2000s. How did she get stronger in the past? Hearing that, Hajin then answered, by eating it. Yona was then shocked to hear the answer. Her shock was natural, because someone could die if they did that. Hajin said, usually yes, but it seems like this person can absorb mana crystals without any side effects. he guessed that maybe she got certain special powers by cooperating with the spirit. Hearing that, Yang Han then drew a conclusion, so, doesn't this make her very dangerous? To be honest, Hajin felt that there's no need to be concerned about Asura. Although it was true that she was stronger than the original story, putting aside her subordinates, if it was a matter of ability, he was superior in terms of suitability. He was also a little annoyed at this time towards the Jin Asura who had the real name Chunhwa. He had given her a beautiful name, but she was running around and acting using that nickname. He was annoyed. What was wrong with the name he gave her? Putting that aside, Hajin then gave the crystal to Suho. Now, he will explain how they can return to the future. The key to maintaining this space is the crystal, the remnant of the tower. The Jin placed the crystal in several places, including the Gwangmyeong City Hall. Without those crystals, the past cannot be manifested. Hearing that, Jong Hak then drew a conclusion, so we just need to take it right. Hajin confirmed it. Hearing that, they immediately knew what they had to do. Their mission was clear this time. Hajin smiled. He confirmed it. The crystals were in 6 locations, including the Gwangmyeong City Hall. Asura and his subordinates must be protecting each location, so they had to defeat them and seize the remnant of the tower.